Hi everyone, this is Sunny from Database Tech. So today I had come up with one more new session on SQL Server Database. In today's session, I will explain what is group by and having clause. So group by clause is SQL command that is used to group rows that have the same values. Now what does that mean? Let's understand this practically in SQL Server. For that, let's open SQL Server first. Now here, before we start, let's pull out the data from a table named as user details. So let's execute this query. Select the query and click on execute. You can see we have the below output from this table in which we have columns like ID, name, state, year and sales. So now let's understand when to use group by clause. And for that, let me give you one requirement so that you can understand this in a better way. Now, let's suppose we have to get the total sales for each employee. Then how we can achieve that? So let's see how we can do this with use of group by clause. So write down the query as select ID, name and then state. So we are fetching three columns here, and it again depends on the requirement how many columns you need and for how many columns you need to apply group by. So for now we are doing this for three columns which are ID, name and state. So let's do this. What's next? From user details, which is a table name. If we will execute this query now, what we will get? It will fetch the data from ID, name and state, but this is not our requirement. Our requirement is to use group by and to get the total sales for each employee. So let's use here group by. Group by ID, name and then state. Now let's execute this query again. So we are getting three rows here, but still it is not our requirement. We didn't get the total sales yet. But let's understand why we are getting three rows only when we use group by. So let's understand this first. So here in this table you can see the first three rows for ID, name and state are having the same values. And fourth and fifth rows for these three columns are also having the same value, and in the same way we are having the same value for 6, 7, 8 row. And if you have notes here in this definition, it is saying for group by that it groups rows that have the same values. So what does that mean? What it has done, see what it is doing, it is grouping them and giving us a single row for these ID, name and state column because they are having the same value. So for this it is giving a single row, and for this also it is giving a single row, and for these three rows it's giving us a single row. So here when we use group by for ID, name and state column, it has given us three rows. So that's why it's giving us three rows. But is this our requirement? No. What we have to do, we have to get the total sales. So let's do that. Now here what we will add, we will get sum. So sum is the function with which we will get the total sales. And if you will check the data again from the table, we have one column which is sales. So in the sum function, we will provide this sales column. Now let's execute this query again. You can see now we get the total sales for each employee, which is Sunny, it is 11,000, for Nisha it's 5, and for Yogesh it is 7. So by this way we get the total sales. And if you need to change the column header here, because this column we have generated. It's not in the table, so that's why it's not having any column header, but you can change it using as alias as total sales. So you can give any meaningful name here in the alias. Now when we execute this query again, you can see it has been replaced with total sales. Now let me give you some more example. Let's fetch the data again from this table. If you will see, we have one more column as year. Now we get the total sales for each employee using this query. But now if someone will say you, we need the total sales as per the year, then how we can achieve that? You can see here for Sunny, for 2001, it is giving us the total sales is 3000. But for the same employee, if you will check here for 2002, it is 4004, which makes 8000. So total sales is 8000. So it should give us 8000. Same way for Nisha for 2003, it is 3. For 2004, it is 2. So we need total sales as per the year. Then how we can achieve this? You don't have to do much. What you have to do, you have to add here one more column, which is year. Now if we execute this query again, will it work? No, it will not work. Let me show you why. But first let's execute this query so that you will get to know here the error. It's giving us error userdetail.year is invalid. Why? Because when we use group by, the number of columns you are fetching here, so we are fetching here 4 columns, but we are getting the data from 4 columns, okay? But when we are using group by here, we are not using group by for these 4 columns, so we are using group by for only 3. And you have to keep this thing in mind, that if you are fetching data, if you are using 4 columns, then you have to use all the 4 columns which we are using here. If you are fetching 2 columns like ID and name, and in the group by you have to give ID and name only. If you are fetching here, if you are taking 4 columns, then you have to provide the 4th column as well, because it will not work without that. So as simple as that. Like if you are using 3 columns, so you have to give 3 columns in the group by. If 4, then you have to give all those columns in the group by. Okay, so now when we execute this query again, it is giving us the data as per the year. Now for 2001 it is 3000, and for 2002 it is 8000. It has, now if you will see again from the table, you can see now for 2002 it is 4 and 4, which makes 8. So that's why it has given us 8 for 2002. Similarly for other employees. So this data is as per the year. But here you have to keep this thing in mind. If you are fetching 3 columns or if you are fetching 4 columns, you have to apply group by for all those columns. So that's how group by works. Now let's understand having clause. So in having clause, it is saying having clause was added to SQL because where clause cannot be used with aggregate functions. Now what does that mean? Let's understand this practically. So here let me write down the aggregate function with group by. So select ID, name, and then we will write down the aggregate function, which is sum of sales from user details, where sum of sales is greater than 7,000 group by, so how many columns we are using here? ID and name, which is 2 columns. So in the group by also we have to use 2 columns. Now let's execute this. And what we have done here, we had used where clause with the aggregate function, which is this one. So we had used this aggregate function with the where clause, and with this we're also using group by. Now let's execute this. So it has given us error as below. An aggregate may not appear in the where clause. Why it's not working? Because see, the where clause filters. So first it's checking like when we have this data. Now we have this data, and where clause checks the data before group by. So here we had used where clause, and it's checking where sum of sales. So now this query doesn't have the sum of sales. It has not done this yet. It doesn't know we have any sum of sales which is greater than 7,000. So it doesn't know we have to check this, because the group by clause is not yet applied to this query, because where clause applied before group by. So if it is applying before, it doesn't know this thing, because this data we will get when we apply group by first, and then we will get to know, okay, we have sum of sales which is greater than 7,000. So that's why we cannot use aggregate function with where clause in group by. And to fix this, to resolve this, what we can do, we can use having clause, because having clause gets applied after group by. So when we use having clause after group by, and after group by we get to know, okay, so we have sum of sales which is greater than 1,000, 7,000, and then when we apply having clause it works. So let's see how we can do that. So first let me copy this here, and then let's use having clause. So for that, first we will remove this where clause, and group by. Now here you can see the difference. So here where clause was applied before group by, so that's why it was not able to find we have any sum of sales which is greater than 7,000. But here in this query, having clause is applied after group by. So first it is getting us the data which we have, like we have at right now we have the data which is greater than 7,000, and then when we applied having clause here, you get to know, okay, we have this data. You can see it's having data which is greater than 7,000, so that's why it is working. But now let's execute this query again with having, so you get to know, okay, so that's why it is working, because here you can see we have this data, and when we apply having clause it checks, because having clause works after group by, so which we have seen here. But here if we execute this query here, it will not work. So that's why we use having with group by. So that was it for today's session. I hope you have understood, and will come up with the next session shortly. Till then, have a nice day. Bye bye. Take care. Be healthy, be safe, and love your family. Bye bye.